Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we're going to be talking with a biologist from the Alberta Conservation Association, Mr. Paul Jones, who is specialized in pronghorn science and research. Welcome, Paul. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, our little pronghorns are quite an interesting species, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are. And for a lot of Albertans, they don't even realize that we actually have pronghorn in the province. So yeah, there are prairie grassland species that you can kind of find pretty much throughout the prairies of Alberta and Saskatchewan. We're kind of at the northern limit of the range. And then every once in a while you hear of accounts of them getting all the way up to Edmonton.
Right.
Like this past winter, there was a small herd of 4 around the Edmonton International Airport. So yeah, a very unique critter.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen the ones over by the airport on 2 different years. And, the question in my mind, is it the same adults that come up here and migrate up here every year, or is it different? And I guess that's some of the stuff that you've been looking into.
Yeah, we haven't got any animals collared as far north of Edmonton, so I don't know if it's the same individuals or different individuals. I suspect it's likely the same individuals that are kind of just moved up there and living there. But for the rest of the prairies, so from like Brooks and Hannah south to the Montana border, yeah, we've got some animals collared now, and we're looking at their movement to migration patterns, and we're starting to get some fascinating results.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, I'm going to take a step back. You've been interested in pronghorns for a long time.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, when I wanted to go back into school and become a biologist, I wanted to be an ungulate biologist. So that's kind of my background. I did a master's in elk, and I've worked with caribou and mountain goats and a bit of deer work. But yeah, when I moved to ACA in Lethbridge, there was an opportunity to start some pronghorn work, and I jumped all over it. So yeah, I've been studying pronghorn since about 2000. Wow.
And this isn't something that's just Alberta-based. You're working with biologists from across the Sage Flats.
Yeah, exactly. So we did an initial project started in 2003 where we put out some collars on about 24 pronghorn in Alberta, and then quickly realized that they're not just living in Alberta, that they're moving between jurisdictions. So we had animals that were moving into Saskatchewan, and then animals that moved into Montana. So that led to a bigger study called the Northern Sagebrush Steppe, where we actually had animals collared in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and Montana. And it was neat just to see everyone moving around and how interconnected these populations are.
Right. And I think you've done lots of research and had programs sort of leading into this, everything from antelope fencing to reestablish traditional migration routes and have antelope move freely through their habitats and their range, and even some citizen science looking for different crossings where antelope might go across some of the linear corridors and roads that intersect their living space.
Yeah, so that real first project where we had collared animals in Alberta, 2 things really came out of that. We had one image that was taken by the capture company of a pronghorn they were releasing, and it was missing all the hair along its back, and the skin almost looked frostbitten. And it took us a while, but we started thinking, what is causing that? And then we kind of realized that's from going repeatedly under barbed wire fences, and it's scraping the hair off their back. And for pronghorn, they prefer to go under. Like 99% of the time, you'll see pronghorn going under a fence as opposed to jumping. They have the physical ability at times to jump a fence, but their behavioral preference is to go under. And we think of that as because when Europeans started settling the West and putting up fences, their initial response was to crawl underneath because they never really needed to jump on the prairies. Like the highest, brush out there would be a shrub brush.
Right.
So they adapted to crawling underneath. And then we also had one animal that during her migration, going from that Many Berries area just north of the Montana border, and she went all the way up to Kindersley, Saskatchewan. But in her movement, she spent 3 days on the south side of the Trans-Canada Highway to the east of Medicine Hat, just going back and forth across the highway. And that kind of led us to the understanding that, it's not a simple migration. It's really a difficult chore for these animals to move when they need to move. So from that result, it kind of branched off into two projects: the Pronghorn fencing initiative that we've been doing with the Alberta Wildlife Federation, where we work with ranchers to replace the bottom wire with a double-stranded smooth wire, so getting rid of that barb that scrapes the hair off their back and causes injuries, and also raising it to approximately 45 centimeters or 18 inches, because we found that that's kind of a preferred height that allows for easier passage. And then from there, we also partnered with the Mistakis Institute and the Canadian Wildlife Federation on a project called Pronghorn Crossing. And that's where we started using citizen science. So having people drive the Trans-Canada Highway from basically Brooks over to Swift Current, and they would record locations where they saw pronghorn either staging on the road, crossing the highway, or sadly dead on the highway. And we took that data and we combined it with a connectivity model for pronghorn that Dr. Andrew Jakes developed as part of his PhD with the original collaring data, with animal vehicle collision data, and kind of came up with some sort of potential mitigation sites along the Trans-Canada Highway where, installing an overpass or an underpass could help facilitate movement by pronghorn and get them across the highway safely and quicker.
Yeah, much like they do in the national parks, they built the overpasses for elk and deer and moose to pass back and forth freely and just avoid the traffic altogether. But, pronghorn, they're quite interesting. They almost seem like they're a high anxiety animal to me. They have these mental blocks, like when they come to a fence, they could jump it, but they don't know how to approach it or how to deal with it. It's like it takes them some time to figure it out. Sometimes you see them pace back and forth. They look for a low part of the fence they cross. And it sounds like that's what they're doing with things like the Trans-Canada Highway that is, a major barrier. It's got to be somewhat daunting to think about getting through all the vehicles and traffic and everything there as well. So it's interesting that the species has certain holdbacks in terms of jumping fences and dealing with barriers.
No, for sure. And I kind of relate the jumping the fences because the bone structure in a pronghorn leg are very thin. Like the bottom bones are like the size of your index finger. So they're very light, they're very small, and that's because that is used to what generate their speed, right? They can run at almost 100 kilometers an hour.
Right.
But the drawback is they don't want to land on that. And I always kind of talk to the general public about, well, put on your wife's stiletto shoes and go up 3 stairs and then jump down and see how you feel when you land. Because it must be kind of somewhat similar for a pronghorn with those small legs when they jump a fence and land on their very thin bones. So that's why, they do. They hit these barriers and then they try to figure out. For fences, a lot of times they have where they know they can cross the fence, what we call a sort of spatial memory of that location. And even though you'll see sometimes pronghorn paralleling a fence, a lot of times they're not looking for a place to cross. They're going to the place where they know they can cross.
Correct. Yeah.
The issue becomes when in wintertime, when that area they could have likely crossed, and now there's a foot of snow or 2 feet of snow, and they can't get under the fence, and then they get really hung up. And that's where we'll see some of our, during major winters, our mass mortalities, because places where they used to be able to cross, they can no longer cross.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've followed pronghorns across North America. They have quite a wide distribution, but I have seen places in Wyoming where the ranchers will go tie up the bottom strand to, the second, third strand and pull it tight and create sort of a triangle. And it's interesting that, the pronghorn will run the entire length of the fence to get over to that spot to cross. So they do have good memory, and it's good to know things like the bones in their legs going into their feet and how dainty they are, because they are a very unique species. We have nothing else like them in North America, and I like to say pronghorns have some fun facts. When you talk about the speeds they can reach, their overall anatomy, their eyesight, Even the structure of their hair, which makes them very susceptible to going under the fences and having it pull out versus a deer. There's lots of things that we need to learn about antelope to help them to find the adaptations they need to survive long term.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
No, for sure. Yeah. So pronghorn are an endemic North American ungulate. So that basically means they evolved on the plains of North America. And not like some of our other ungulates like deer and elk that came across from Europe to North America. Pronghorn are basically only found in North America. So a lot of people kind of call them antelope because of Lewis and Clark, when they first saw them, it reminded them of the antelope in Africa. But they're actually not even genetically related to the African antelopes. Their closest relative is actually the giraffe.
Right.
And if people put up a picture of a pronghorn next to a giraffe's face, you can see resemblance there. It's very interesting to see.
It certainly is. It makes them a very unique species for North America overall. And, Alberta's blessed. We have such diverse habitats that we are on the northern extent of that animal's range in North America. And they have been able to thrive and survive and adapt. And I think that's a lot of what you've looked at in your career. You've actually won a lot of awards for the work you've done on pronghorn.
Yeah. So for my pronghorn work, I've kind of won the Prairie Conservation Award, which is given out during the Prairie Conservation and Endangered Species Workshop. And then I also have won 2 special recognition awards. And then the really highlight of my career was winning the Berendo Award, which is given out by the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies during the biannual pronghorn workshop. So Berendo is actually derived from the Spanish word for pronghorn. That's what it's named after. And basically, I was kind of given the award for my long-term commitment and research for pronghorn and helping in the conservation of the species.
Yeah, and very well deserved. I remember writing that up for Alberta Outdoorsman magazine and covering some of the things, because I think that's a celebration for all Albertans, to have somebody that's dedicated a career to a species like the pronghorn to ensure their survival and their well-being overall. Like, sometimes species survive, but they can thrive even better with a little help from humans and the way we adapt our own specific managements of the landscape and the barriers that we create. So, yeah, big congratulations, Paul, on staying true to your roots as a kid in terms of wanting to be an ungulate biologist and finding a species that is very unique to deal with and very, I'd say, draws a lot of passion out of people, whether you're just a conservationist or a hunter. There's a lot of interest in pronghorn. We have a long draw process. It probably takes 15 years to get a draw these days, but the interest is there. And I think it's because that species is so unique, and the fun facts that we know about it make it appealing. And, this is Harvest Your Own, so I'll also say that they grace a plate like nothing else. It's like a pre-seasoned piece of meat that you would have them ingest the sage rather than put it on the steaks and roasts.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brad. And I think, one of the strongest things that I try to do is just create awareness about the species and their uniqueness and why we need to think about them on our prairie landscapes.
Yes, absolutely. We've touched briefly here on the research and, the collaring program, the looking for crossings, getting citizens involved, which I think is important. You get more people involved and create that awareness. I think that the pronghorn is a champion across the landscape. Tell us a little bit more about the collaring program. You talked about the daintiness of the bones in their legs and their feet and how, I don't know if I want to use the word fragile, but they're certainly dainty, and you'd have to handle them carefully.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we've just initiated a new collaring project, actually, where we collared our first go-around was last December, so December 2024. Where we captured 106 pronghorn between Alberta and Saskatchewan. And we use net gunning from a helicopter. And we have the helicopter crew do all of the processing to reduce times. So we try to keep the chase pursuit time to within 2 minutes at max. But for most of our captures, we're hitting 30 seconds or less
Wow.
to have the animals net gunned from the helicopter and down on the ground. And then we also want to keep the handling time down as well. So, we kind of set, 30 minutes max with ideally it's 20 minutes, but most of our animals were getting handled. So putting the collar on, taking the samples we want, blood samples, hair samples, and a fecal sample. We're having the company do it within 6 to 7 minutes of getting that work done. And then the animal is up and running and released. Because they are very, as you said, sort of skittish and high energy animals, and they stress quite easily. So we're trying to get everything done as quickly as we can and get the animal back up on its feet and running away.
Well, I think that's record-setting times for that kind of stuff. I've seen the net guns used on a number of species over the years, and it does seem to be very efficient. And I think the major advantage is that it really reduces that handling time. I always look at pronghorns as being a little bit more at risk than others. We talk about them crossing fences and losing hair. They do have a hollow hair on them that is quite notable when you actually see it or feel it, and it comes out of the hide very easily. So I think that naturally they're more susceptible to issues and problems like fences and handling and all the rest of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the hair is very brittle. So going under fences, I've seen lots of cases where you can see just like puffs of hair coming off their back when they hit that fence.
Right.
And sometimes a little bit during captures, we'll see some hair loss, but not as much. But yeah, it's certainly very brittle and comes off very easy.
Tell us a little bit about the collars themselves. Like, we're talking about the hair, how it's brittle, how it can break. How do they adapt to the collars, and does it impact them in any way?
Yeah, for the most part, they adapt fairly quickly to having a collar on. And we also make sure that they're lightweight, so they're within like 2%, 3% of an animal's body weight, so that they're not like carrying excess weight around. I mean, when they first get collars and they get up, you can see some sort of reaction to it where they're not sure, and they'll shake their head. But then after that, they're pretty good. They get kind of used to it. Now, these collars do have a drop-off mechanism built onto them that's programmed to drop off after 4 years. So basically, kind of the idea of when the batteries on these collars are dying, that the collar will drop off so the animal doesn't have to wear it for its lifetime. But then if we do see some, adverse reactions by the pronghorn, or maybe we're seeing like significant hair loss from wearing the collar, I have the ability to remotely actually drop that collar off the animal right away via the website. So it's kind of, we're just making sure that, we're thinking about the animal and their safety and their health when we're capturing these animals.
Yeah, it's pretty high tech compared to what science used to be.
Oh, for sure. Like we're all becoming, as we call it, desktop biologists, because these are satellite collars. So they collect the location about every 5 minutes on the animal. Every 5 hours on the animal, unless it enters a geofence. So I have programmed a geofence around the Trans-Canada Highway. So when an animal moves into there, it actually collects a location every 15 minutes. So we get some high resolution spatial and temporal data on how the animals are interacting with the Trans-Canada Highway. And then every roughly about almost 2 days, it uploads all of the locations from the last batch of locations up to a website. So I can sit at my computer and see where my animals are and how they're moving around the landscape, and whether they've left Alberta and gone into Saskatchewan or even down into Montana. Right.
So it's a very good indicator of habitat connectivity.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like out of the 106 animals that we collared in December 2024, we had about 63% of them remained in the jurisdiction, so either Alberta or Saskatchewan, that they were collared. We had 34% that actually went back and forth between jurisdictions. So, and that was mostly going back and forth between Alberta and Saskatchewan for the most part. And then a few that went between Alberta or Saskatchewan down into Montana. And we had 3% of our animals that actually used 3 jurisdictions. So they used Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Montana. So it just, highlights again how interconnected the pronghorn population is.
Right. And it was an eye opener for me, because I always knew that pronghorn moved a bit, but there are some big movements by some of the animals.
Yeah, so far I think we're like one of the animals has moved over 200 kilometers during one of its migrations. We just did our second round of collaring where we put out 156 collars. And some of those animals, that when we did it in December, they were like north of Grasslands National Park. Sort of, if you kind of drew a line between the Trans-Canada Highway and the Montana border, about halfway down. And they're right now they're actually sitting down along Highway 2 in Montana that runs sort of east-west from Shelby all the way over to Glasgow. So they're making some big movements at times.
Wow. And is this a necessary movement? Like, is it because of snow events or poor habitat from drought? Do you think there's things that we can learn that tell us why they're migrating such great distances and using all these different connected habitats?
Yeah, so that's really one of the goals of this study is to try to figure out what is driving these movements. So I know last winter, especially in Saskatchewan, we've seen a lot of big movements, and it was in relationship to the snow. And for pronghorn, they have a high foot loading index, one of the highest for ungulates, which basically means they don't deal well with snow. They break through really easy. And when the snow becomes a foot or a foot and a half deep, they really struggle with those conditions, and they will move long distances and do what we call a facultative migration, where in the middle of winter, if the snow keeps getting bad and the snow conditions don't allow them to forage, they'll make some big movements, trying to find better conditions where they can forage.
And do they do that as a group to sort of pack down snow, take turns being the leader, create a trail? Yeah,
we've got some definitely observations of animals moving in herds of 50 to all the way up to 500 at times during these snow conditions, trying to move to new areas. And a lot of times it'll be fairly almost single file with animals moving with one in the front and then everyone else following behind.
Oh, very interesting. Another question, just out of curiosity, has any of the movements included crossing rivers? Like, there's some big rivers in antelope habitat.
Yeah, no, for sure. The South Saskatchewan Red Deer River, they have no issues crossing. Sometimes, depending on what time of year it is, they might even wait till it freezes up and then cross. But they don't have an issue swimming.
Very interesting. Yeah, I didn't know if they'd look for shallow areas or, wait for freeze up, because I'm sure that snow depth in the river valleys could impact movement. But it's interesting that natural barriers that they evolved with aren't a challenge to them. It's the man-made stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you said, natural barriers, rivers, they'll know where to cross and they'll go to those spots and cross. It's when they start running into all the linear features that we put on the landscape. So the roads, the fences, and then sometimes it's the interaction of, a fence road. So then now they're dealing with getting across the road, but before they can do that, they have to also get across two fences in all likelihood. And right. Then the Trans-Canada is really a barrier effect because, especially in the Alberta side, we have fences on both sides of the Trans-Canada Highway. We have 4 lanes of traffic with a wide meridian. And then on the north side of the Trans-Canada Highway, we also have a set of railway tracks that's sometimes fenced as well. So, they're like running the gauntlet as best they can to get across that feature.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure that some of the research you're doing right now and looking at the movements could help identify where fences can be altered and their natural migration routes could use, a little bit of help from ranchers and citizens that want to see the pronghorn flourish.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's, key to the work that we've been doing with the Alberta Wildlife Federation is working with landowners to replace that bottom wire with a double-stranded smooth wire. And, the nice thing for the landowner, once they give us permission to do the work, is they get the material for free. And then the Alberta Wildlife Federation sends their volunteers out and they actually put it up over a fencing weekend. And the volunteers just love that work. It gives them a sense of pride that they're helping out a species that needs it.
Yeah, and I've talked to some of the ranchers that have had the work done, and they feel that it doesn't hamper their cattle containment either. So they're pretty happy in a couple ways. They learn new fencing techniques that are efficient, and they get basically some financial aid from conservation organizations and our biological community to improve the entire travel area for pronghorn and other species. I mean, we talk about raising the fences for pronghorn, but there's benefits to mule deer and other species as well.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the trail camera work I did when I was testing different fence modifications to see how pronghorn would react. One of the things we quickly realized is if deer aren't spooked, so there's not a vehicle driving down a road that's making them jump a fence, they actually prefer to crawl under fences.
Right.
And we have lots of images of both does and bucks crawling under fences that have that bottom wire at 18 inches.
Wow. Yeah, so wildlife-friendly fencing, there's some good messages in there for everyone.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Now, I must ask, why did you only collar females?
So it's kind of a two-pronged response to that question. So the first one is usually when you have limited dollars, you kind of focus on one of the species. And then we tend to focus on females because they're kind of like the reproductive unit of the herd, of the population. So if you're creating habitat and maintaining female populations, you're likely also maintaining the buck populations because they're likely just following the females around.
Okay.
But it would be interesting at some point down the road to look at, the pronghorn bucks and how they move around the landscape and what kind of habitat they select. Because really no one has really studied the buck component of populations across North America yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I know, when you see big movements of elk, it's usually the lead cow that decides the trails and leads the herd and everything else follows. I wasn't sure if something like that occurs with pronghorn where they have, the dominant female that makes a lot of decisions in terms of whether it's a small group or a big group, how much they move.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you bring up the elk and, the lead cow kind of directing where they're going to go. Pronghorn are so fluid in their group dynamics, and we're actually starting to see that a lot with our collar data. So a group of 5 pronghorn that you see one day, and you come out the next day and you see the same, and you see what you think is the same 5, may actually not be the same 5. Like one of them or 2 of them may have left and another 1 or 2 have come in and joined that group. So we've actually had some collared animals that were collared in different areas that sort of joined up in the springtime actually and spent the summer together. And then in the fall sort of separated when a third animal came in and took one of them away.
Yeah, interesting.
So, yeah, it would be interesting to see some of this herd structure and dynamics because it's very fluid with pronghorn.
Very interesting. Best friends until somebody else shows up.
Exactly. Yeah.
This doesn't happen easily or without a bunch of funding. Maybe just explain to us exactly what is on a collar, everything from how they attach it to how it transmits, and there's got to be an antenna of types, but they're probably not something that doesn't cost a lot of money in terms of being able to do research effectively.
Yeah, so one of these collars, how it kind of looks, is has sort of the belting around the side, and then on the top is like a GPS, kind of like your GPS unit, your regular GPS unit, and that's what transmits to the satellites and gets its location, and then also transmits to the website. And then on the bottom part that hangs sort of below the neck is the battery pack. And that's what sort of runs the collar. And right now they're roughly about $2,300 a collar, plus the activation fees and then the data fees for actually uploading all to the website. So yeah, they're not cheap, and they also do have a built-in mortality sensor, which we've now set at 6 hours. So if that collar remains inactive or stationary and doesn't move for 6 hours, it automatically gets a location of where that collar is and then sends me a notification to my phone that this collar has gone into mortality mode.
Right.
And then that's when we sort of initiate a investigation and try to get out there within 24 to 48 hours to see what might cause that mortality.
Have you lost a few animals?
We have lost a few, yeah. Yeah, we're roughly, our survivorship rates are around 80%. So yeah, I think we're up to around roughly 20 to 25 animals right now.
Very interesting. Now,
Yeah.
the cost of the project, obviously we're going to need some partners for a couple of reasons. Financially, to share management objectives, goals, opportunities. We're talking about jurisdictions, Montana, Saskatchewan, Alberta. If animals are moving across these man-made boundaries and into different areas, there's got to be some joint management.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the funding, we've got a very diverse group of funders. So Alberta Conservation Association for sure provides funding, but then we also have the Alberta Professional Outfitters Society through their Wildlife Management Fund. We have Blood Origins and Dallas Safari Club Foundation. They're collaborative of provide funding for collars and capture. Environment and Climate Change Canada, iHunter, and there's the Minister Special License, both the auction, which is administered by APOST, and Minister Special License, the raffle, which is administered by ACA. Funding from Parks Canada National Program for Ecological Corridors, and then Saskatchewan Fish and Wildlife Development Fund. And then lastly, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which is supported through the Bezos Earth Fund, Burger King, Capri Holdings, and Cargill. So they're the ones that have really helped provide funding to help us purchase collars and do the captures.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the project management itself, Alberta Conservation is sort of the lead, but I'm also working with representatives from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas and Alberta Forestry and Parks, Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment, and then we also have a couple of grad students right now at the University of Calgary. Yeah, and then lastly, we work with landowners as well for the fencing work that we're doing, as well as also providing us permission to access their land during captures, which we're grateful for.
Right. I think the diversity of people involved in this in terms of funding and partners speaks to how everyone is concerned about the pronghorn and want to see more information on them. What are some of the outcomes and goals from the research moving into the future?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, like we said, they're an endemic prairie species. They're only found in the prairies. And they're almost becoming like the icon for the prairies because they're one of the few remaining ungulates that's free roaming across the prairies. So, part of what we're going to look at is, in terms of the outcomes is, can we keep movement and migration on this landscape for this species? So that may entail at some point building either an overpass, which is preferred by pronghorn, or an underpass across the Trans-Canada Highway to allow for that easier passage. Again, continuing on the fencing work with our partners and landowners to help ease that movement by raising the bottom wire. And then looking at, habitat, making sure it's connected, that animals can move across the landscape. Especially, in the wintertime, they're very susceptible to mass die-offs when we have major winter events. So them being able to move is going to be key. So, looking at strategies that can do that. Wow. And then also looking at, what are our survival rates, and then, working those into like an integrated population model. It's definitely conservation ideas that, help keep the species on the landscape.
Which is important to all of us. So, I'm very thrilled that you guys are doing this research and that you're leading it up, that we have so many diverse partners and funding partners as well, because I think it speaks to the importance of the species to all of these different organizations that are involved, different governments, different levels. Is there anything an individual in Alberta listening might be able to do? Can people help support the program? Like ACA is a private nonprofit conservation organization. They can make donations to the program or sponsor an antelope collar or something, a pronghorn collar.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, like if they go to our website, ACA's website, there is a portal there where they can actually make a donation to the project. It allows you to specify which project you're donating to. So for sure. And then even just kind of keeping up with what we're doing. So via social media, the last Thursday of every month, ACA puts a post out there highlighting one of our animals and what she's doing, how much she's moving. So, kind of keeping in touch with what we're doing and helping support it that way.
Yeah, I watch for it every month. I find it very interesting, and I want to see what's coming up and what the movements are, and, sort of look back over the last month and try to figure out in my own mind what might have caused some of those movements, whether there was weather events or different things going on in an antelope's world or a pronghorn's world that would make it want to move long distance or stay in a specific spot?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'll kind of give a little hint. I think the next one we're going to do is one of the animals we collared last, so December 2024 in Saskatchewan. And she did a 90-kilometer facultative migration down into Montana. And then in the following spring in April, she turned around and migrated back into Saskatchewan, and we went all the way up to the Trans-Canada Highway near Swift Current. So she's one of our longest migrating animals.
Wow.
But then this winter, she didn't actually go back down south for the winter. She actually went west and paralleled the Trans-Canada Highway and left sort of Swift Current area and went to Antelope, Saskatchewan. So again, unique pattern in terms of their movement.
Yeah, and it tells researchers like yourself things about the barrier of a major highway. Like it's obviously impacting where they feel comfortable moving or where they will move. You know, it's sometimes they're forced to because of conditions or weather events. But, you know, what I'm hearing from you, Paul, is that, again, I can see the antelope looking anxious or having some anxiety trying to figure out how to deal with all these vehicles and this traffic and the noise and all of these interactions within their habitats.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, if you're driving along a highway and you see a pronghorn, I bet you it's pacing back and forth trying to figure out where it wants to cross.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that many times, and often, you know, sometimes it helps to slow down or even stop and let them cross. We don't see a lot of information about what people can do to help them, but hopefully that's all part of the research and messages that come out in the future.
Yep, no, exactly. Like if we can really hone in on somewhere where their major crossing of highways are, and then even just, you know, get the signage or some way down the road just to let people know, like, this is a major area where expect pronghorn to cross.
Yes. Well, we appreciate what you're doing. I would encourage people to follow Alberta Conservation Association on Facebook and Instagram and look for those monthly updates or information tidbits of a specific animal, what they're doing, how they live, where they move, all the rest of it. Visit the website too. There's some great information there on antelope in general, the different programs and projects that have gone on. And there's ways of, you know, people can get involved through citizen science and other ways. So keep the pronghorn in your mind, and hopefully the work that you're doing is going to ensure a very bright future for them at the northern extent of their range through Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Sounds good, and thanks for having me on, Brad.
Yes, maybe we can do a follow-up in a year or two just to see what more we've learned from the research and the data, because I'm sure it's ever-changing and it's not set outcomes or things that you might think happen. It's there's often surprises, isn't there?
Oh, every year we put a collar on, we get surprises, and you know, we're hoping that each collar will last 4 years. So it's going to be about a 7-year project. So yeah, definitely we should do some follow-ups, and I can, you know, kind of give the listeners a better idea of what's really going on in that landscape.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for joining us today. We are grateful to have an expert in Alberta to deal with things and some of the, cutting edge research as well. So keep up the good work, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brad.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.